episode number 10. Feels like a milestone to me. I feel a little accomplished, I'm not going to lie. We are celebrating the first 10 consecutive weeks of No Set Path episodes, and I can't think of a better way to do that than bringing my buddy Zach Kuperstein onto the show. Zach is an Indie Spirit Award-nominated cinematographer. He lensed 2022's breakout horror hit Barbarian, which did amazing at the box office. He's just the nicest guy in the whole world and really emphasizes positivity and having fun on set, and that really comes through in our conversation. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to the show. We're also streaming this on YouTube, so please head over to our channel, give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment, even a subscribe. That really helps push us up to the top of the heap and gets us in front of the eyes and ears of more listeners. Thanks so much, and here we go with Zach. Well, thanks for doing this, Zach. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. I was thinking about if we've ever worked together more than just the one time, but, you know, I get introduced to you through our mutual friend, Greg Harriet, and
right.
The way I met you was when I was directing that like random Woodford Reserve job at Bon Appetit, and you came in and like helped us out cam-opping, and then I never saw you again for years and years and years. And then, you know, I've worked with Greg a couple times. I never saw you, and literally I turned around and you're like shooting all these like really big, you know, at least from my purview, really big movies. I mean, you just shot Barbarian, which did amazing at the box office, and I want to get into all of that. But I was just like, man, I don't know what happened when I wasn't paying attention, but Zach like blew up.
I don't know what happened either. It was a shock to me as well. So.
It's a good problem to have, man.
Yes, it is.
So I do want to do like a little bit of backstory. Like, how did you even find cinematography and filmmaking in general? Like, how did it even start for you?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, you know, in some ways my path is very standard, but in other ways I've noticed in talking to a lot of filmmakers recently, and it started to like solidify in my brain how different my approach is and why it's so different. And it's, I think, because I was drawn to filmmaking from the process and the making part of it before I was drawn to the cinema part of it. A lot of people who I talk to are cinephiles and watch a lot of movies, know about a lot about movies that they've seen, and can recall movies like, you know, like that. And I don't have that ability. And I love watching movies now, but it took me a really long time to get into watching movies. And there wasn't like a particular movie that sparked my interest in cinema. It was more that I loved making things. So when I was growing up, I had so many hobbies and interests and things that were like involved in making things. So I got into woodworking in a big way. I thought I wanted to be a magician for a little bit. Now that I look back, I'm like, oh, cinematography is actually a lot like being a magician, because you're just, you know, performing the tricks and nobody really knows what's going on except you know how it's done.
Yeah.
I love that. It really scratches that itch. So it kind of came from that. And like I did still photography, and I was always interested in like tinkering and like not exactly Legos, but like erector sets, kind of mechanical moving things. And one day I picked up my dad's camcorder. He had like a Sony Handycam. He got for like home videos, I guess. And I was like, oh, can I play with this? And he was like, just be very careful with it. It's very expensive. Yeah. Okay. And I had some friends who were, they were into skateboarding, and I was terrible at skateboarding. So I was like, let me just film them skateboarding and see how that goes. And then I was like, oh, I can make a skate video and edit it in iMovie and put music to it and everything. And then it became another form of just making things. So I was like, okay, I've got all these hobbies. What's sort of the thing, which of these hobbies is going to become a job? Because where I grew up in the suburbs in Massachusetts, it was very, career focused, and like, what are you going to do when you grow up, and what college are you going to go to? And I knew I did not want to have a desk job. I didn't want to, be in an office. So I really wanted to do something with my hands and be out in the world and finding new things every day. So filmmaking really seemed to have a lot of that. And I took some TV video classes in high school, and then I did a summer high school film program in Boston, and it was like a month-long intensive, 24/7. You're making movies with friends. And that was like the test and the selling point for me. It was like, wow, I really just need to do this for the rest of my life. This is definitely the thing for me. The people that I discovered are really like and film people that I always meet are like, they're my people. It's like, it feels right, you know? Everybody kind of has that like collaborative problem solving attitude and really enjoys the process the way that I really enjoy the process. So then it was a question of, okay, well, I'm going to go to film school, I guess, and like be a director, because that's what you do. And I did a number of things in high school to try to, get there, and ended up going to NYU, and thought I wanted to be a director, and tried that and was not very good at it. And realized that, I'm not really a like visionary seed idea person. I'm more of a, let's take somebody else's awesome idea and make it even more awesome. And I had, the kind of technical ability of making things, and loved the behind the scenes magic and the being on set so much that I was drawn to cinematography and shooting other people's projects. I originally thought it was like, oh, this is a stepping stone to directing. This will be something that I eventually get to do, because I'm a DP and there's like, assistantship or something like that, which is absolutely not the case. And then I was like, I can't direct. I'm terrible at this. I made a couple of short films. One in particular that was really bad. I had a friend actually from the summer program I did, that when we were in high school, we made a couple. I think we each made 2 short films. Two where I directed, and 2 where he directed. And we shot each other's projects. And his looked great and had an awesome story, and mine had no story, were terrible, and didn't look good. And it was like, oh, well, maybe there's something to be learned here. So. So then when I got to film school and failed a bunch at directing, and I was already working as a camera assistant a little bit and developing some mentors who were cinematographers, I was like, oh, I could really just do this. So this is the thing. So I kind of dropped the directing thing, and that launched me into, a kind of great starting point and a reputation within film school that's like, oh, Zach's a DP. And because I've, made my name as a DP, suddenly I'm a good DP, but that's, that wasn't the case at the time. It just took a lot of shooting all those projects to get there.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think failing is super important. I fail all the time. I just don't tell anybody about it. I do feel like a lot of kinship, or very much on the same page with you on a lot of things. Like, I had a desk job for 5 years out of college. I never want to go back to that again. So good on you for...
What was the job?
I was doing tech support over the phone. It wasn't great.
Oh, it's brutal, man.
Yeah, that's a whole different story. But I love the creation. I love doing stuff with my hands. I'm also like a wannabe woodworker as well. I've built a couple of things around the house. So I feel you on all that. Where in Massachusetts did you grow up?
Wellesley. It's like half hour outside.
Yeah, I went to school in Lowell, so I'm...
great. Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I lived in Brookline for 3 or 4 years. Wow. Yeah.
I was born and grew up the first 3 years of my life in Brookline, but then moved out when I was a child, so...
Right on. Cool, man. You were at school, you've made some connections there, and obviously you started working on set, or maybe you tell me, was it like right out of the gate, you're like working full-time on set, or were you... doing some set work and then like doing some odd jobs or some part-time stuff, or what did that look like for you?
I mean, I think there's something to be learned in my path, in that very beginning of it. And I think that just trying to be on set as much as possible, starting with student films, there wasn't really like a hard transition. It felt continuous, because that there was another test in my life that I gave myself, was the summer between my sophomore and junior year of college. That's right. And I stayed in New York for that summer, whereas the previous summer I went back to Massachusetts. That summer I was like, okay, I'm going to try to pay rent. I'm going to try to live in New York, and I'm going to try to work for the most part on film sets. Right. And I was already, ACing for a lot of, a handful of cinematographers at school, and kind of slowly developed, I can like make a little bit of money doing this. That's crazy. I can get $100 a day to like show up and, shoot a music or work on a music video or something. And my rent was $500 to live in the tiniest of spaces. Like really, it was a the end of an apartment that was set off with a bookshelf and a curtain that was 2 twin-size beds, like in an L shape. And then I shared that space with another friend, and each of us paid $500 to live in that per month. So I was like, okay, I have to make $500 each month. I think that's doable. And I did. And I made it, that much plus a little bit more to, get food, pizza, basically $1 slices. And survived that summer in a way that was like, oh, I can be working this way. So then when I went back to school, it was easy to keep the work going and prioritizing that over schoolwork. So whenever there was a job to be had, I was doing it, whether it was paid or not. It was just yes. I'll do everything possible to be on set, including shooting student films, including ACing on student films, including ACing on music videos and everything. And I did a little bit of grip and electric work as well. So then when I graduated in 3 years, because I realized, NYU is really focused on directors, and I was like, I'm done. I've taken all the classes that are worth taking for a cinematographer. So I got out of school and had that sort of cushion year where my peers were all still in school for another year, and I could shoot their student films, but I didn't have the course load to deal with. And I wasn't paying tuition for that year. So I was like, I'm still kind of in school. It still felt very transitional. But it wasn't a hard transition because, again, I was already working. And then those cinematographers who were a few years ahead of me, they graduated and they started shooting little things. And I'd be like, great, I can show up and, for a branded content, like, swatch ad sort of thing and show up and pull focus for a day and make $200 now. So that happened very easily and naturally. And before I knew it, I was, had a small set of mentors and people who I worked a lot with. There were, just a number of other DPs that were like, they're working, and I can just be like, following along, learning what they do, and then simultaneously trying to shoot as much as I could and shoot student films, short films, music videos, branded content stuff. And I eventually bought a 5D Mark II because that was like very popular at the time.
Yeah, man, that was the moment for a lot of people, sure.
Exactly. And I saved up for it. That was like a huge expenditure. I was like, okay, I'm going to like buy a camera and, get a lens and all that. And that really paid off in spades because it was like, I could go do these like corporate interview things easily. And I would get like $500 every time I went to go do one of those for like 4 hours of work. And I had to bring my camera and, I developed a little like suitcase setup, and I would just go and set up the interview and all that. And I must have shot like 1,000 interviews, just not that many, but hundreds of interviews for sure, doing the corporate things, and then also like little documentary bits and then some cooking shows, and shot some of that stuff. And then I was kind of came back, did a little bit with Greg, and that's how I met you. So there's sort of a train of people, and it's all just like passing on work, right?
Man, it's so funny to me how like the world gets ever smaller in our industry. To step back to film school really quick, I come from the other side of the tracks where it's like, I never went to film school. I'm completely self-taught. Did a full stop career change at 30. I was all in on music and then couldn't make any money doing that. So I found filmmaking.
Good choice.
Good choice. I don't know, in your opinion, right? Because it sounds like you had some connection with folks. It sounds like you met or started to form like your tribe of people that you could connect with and work with. Do you think like if you hadn't gone to film school, you would have wound up in the same place you are now? Like, do you think you still had that drive, or was that like a pivotal thing for you?
It was pivotal in the sense of like finding my people, and so many of my people are from film school today. Yeah. So it's hard to imagine a network that would have formed in a different way. But I would like to think I had the drive and would probably be doing similar types of thing, maybe with very different people. But it was definitely an easy way to get on set to start. That's for sure. Because there were student films that were just there, easily accessible, and I wasn't vying against other people who are already working. And it was just, I'm available on the weekend. Great. I must be the best AC around because I'm around. So I think that, and the stakes are so low on student films, you can screw up and you can like you can fail, and it's okay as long as you have a good attitude about it. Everybody's going to be like, oh, I really liked that person, and then they'll keep bringing you along. So I think because of the leveling that happens naturally in a school environment where you have seniors and freshmen in the same space, freshmen can be working on these senior projects, and then the seniors graduate and take along the freshmen who were good. So there's like an easy access to one step up, which then continues to level up, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think that it's really helpful. It's a great way to jumpstart. But end of the day, who knows? It's hard to say like if that was critical or if it just happened to work.
Yeah, it's more of like a personal curiosity for me, right? Because I just come from a totally different school of thought. So how long did that whole situation go on for, where you're just like really doing the proper hustle until you got to like be the DP on your first feature? Let's kind of fast forward to that.
Work brings work, which I think is the biggest mantra that I've had. And it's especially on set. It's a little bit harder, like if you're in post or something like that. But every time you walk on set, you meet at least 20 new people. And if one of those people remembers you and then brings you on to the next set, then you get to meet another 20 people. And it's like, it just spins off, and it's so easy to just get work once it starts. And it does take some time to get going, but once it's going, it's going. I was like, I want to shoot a feature film. That would be awesome. That's my dream. And I had kind of been putting the vibe out there that's something that I wanted, and that I really wanted to focus on narrative work, as I started to discover that there were these sort of delineations between narrative and commercial, or music video and documentary, and they do have sort of different zones. And I kind of wanted to specialize in narrative. So I put that out there and told people that, and took opportunities ACing on a feature as opposed to waiting for more commercial work to come along, which would probably pay better in the long run. So I graduated in 2011, just to put that in the timeline. In 2014, I was ACing a lot, and also shooting some stuff. There were like little web series type things, and short films, and music videos and whatnot. That was all kind of happening throughout that I was DPing, and sometimes I would bring the 5D along, and sometimes it was, we get to rent a camera or whatever, and sometimes I get to have crew and sometimes not. But those were all kind of happening in 2014, and did this, like, I call it the terrible, awful, no good, very bad Chinese road trip movie, which was at the end of 2014. Me and a now good friend of mine, Rob Coe, he and I were both A-Cam and B-Cam first ACs respectively on this. It was a short film, but it was 30 days without a day off, and it was traveling across the country, and really a disaster.
Oh, man.
I won't get into detail about it.
No, that's rough.
Yeah. So right before that happened, I was like, I think I want to stop ACing. My friend Brandon, he's a fantastic DP, but he would always shoot wide open and handheld and no rehearsals. And it just stressed me out a lot. I was like, I'm a decent focus puller, but I don't know if I want to be full of focus for the rest of my life.
Dude, I AC'd for like 5 minutes and then realized I'm a terrible AC. And it was not a good match for me at all. So I give you credit for lasting that long.
Yeah, it was a while, and it just became too much, and I was like, I really just want to be a DP, and that's like the thing for me. So how do I make that transition? If I keep working as an AC, everybody's going to keep knowing me as an AC. So I think I just need to stop taking AC work. I don't remember what exactly sparked that idea, but it was just sort of this realization: if I just take ownership of this concept and put it out there that I'm a DP now and only a DP, maybe it'll just happen. At the end of that year, January 1st of 2015, I was like, no more AC jobs. That was it.
Yeah. Just to interject for a second, it's kind of starting to manifest something for yourself. And you kind of have an idea where you want to be, and you take that scary leap of saying, okay, this is what I'm doing now, for better or worse, right? This is what I'm doing. And you have to start to like talk yourself into it and almost manifest that new trajectory. I'm glad you had the wherewithal to just be like, okay, no more AC jobs. I'm just going for what I want to do. So please continue.
Well, exactly. And yeah, it was very hard, and it was a big loss in some ways. And it was, I well, not in some ways, I lost a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right? I turned down tons and tons of work, and I was making the most money I've ever made in 2014. And the next year I made half of that. And it took me until 2 years ago to make that much again. So it was like another, 7 years? Yeah, 7 years until I'm making as much as I did when I was 18 7 years ago. It's crazy.
Wild.
But it paid off in spades in a career that I truly got very lucky with. So the Matt Porter's feature did come to fruition, which was really exciting. And it's called Five Doctors. And that was the first feature I shot. And that was in the spring of 2015. And so much fun because I got to bring on just all of my friends and everybody I'd been working with. And it was the dream team. It was like everybody that I was like, oh, I got to handpick the best players in the major leagues to do this movie together. And we had so much fun doing it. So it was a real family affair and felt really good to make. And the film, didn't really have that much success, but it was, I got a feature, I did it. And I felt good about making it. I liked the movie, and it was really cool to work with everybody on it. Also kind of in the works around that time, Nick Pesh and I, we'd been freshman year roommates, so we knew each other for a long time. We shot The Eyes of My Mother in 2015. So I'd known him for 8 years at that point. We did a bunch of music videos in the years prior, and we did a short version of Eyes of My Mother in 2014.
So we can explain for those who don't know, what was so important about Eyes of My Mother in terms of your career trajectory?
It went to Sundance. I got nominated for an Inspirit Award because of it, and I had a lot of fun doing it. It was a very similar family affair. It was a lot of the same crew from Five Doctors that we brought over to The Eyes of My Mother, and it was, but it's a horror movie, and really, I don't know, it did well. So it kind of launched everything, and I just have to say it's pure luck. It was like, oh, that was a script that was good in the right ways, landed at the right time, had the right producers, got into Sundance because of the producer connections, and people didn't really know what to expect out of it, and it just had breakout success in a way that nobody could have predicted leading up to it, and I couldn't have planned for and tried to get that job. It just happened. So lucky for me that happened in the first year that I had decided I'm a DP now only. I can shoot I did 2 features in 1 year.
That's a hell of a first year to be committing full time to being a DP. Damn,
absolutely,
dude.
It was wild. But I think it came from having done a lot of shorts and a lot of work before that. And 2014 wasn't just I wasn't only seeing, I was shooting a lot, so it was just okay, I'm gonna just make this transition and see what happens.
If you're prioritizing feature cinematography, feature narrative work, and you're trying to make yourself available and put yourself out there for those things that you want, how are you making ends meet in the interim? Is it just as simple as I'm just doing shooting commercials when I can? Or is it, I'm just curious, what does that look like for you?
I mean, it kind of is, but I don't shoot commercials really.
Yeah.
And
okay.
Not because I don't want to, but because I didn't put that out there, and because I didn't do that early, I don't have much of a commercial reel to speak of. Nobody's going to look at my commercial work and be like, I really want that guy to shoot my commercials. I just haven't done enough of that work. So, it's still the case where I don't really do that much work in between features. And I would like to, but at that time I did have a handful of branded content connections, and I was still doing those corporate videos with the 5D. I would still go and do anything I could there. I remember a lot of History Channel interviews or random one day interview things. So many interviews, really.
So many interviews. I've shot so many interviews. Oh my God.
Right? It's oh my God, do we need to see another talking head? But it's also a cool learning ground lighting wise, at least. I'm sure it's really boring as a director, but lighting, I'm I get to try something a little different and see what happens if I do this on a face. And,
yeah, man. But it's all as I'm sure you would agree, it's all that adds up to a backlog of knowledge. Even though something might be repetitive, you're building your encyclopedic knowledge of this stuff. But yeah, man. so many interviews. I've shot so many
Yeah,
interviews. It's like
it's insane.
ridiculous.
So like that's the bread and butter, but there wasn't a lot of that, to be honest. And there was tons of downtime. I'm still adjusted. I mean, maybe I'm adjusted now, but I still have tons of downtime.
How are you filling that downtime?
Woodworking actually is, and tinkering, and I've brought back a lot of the hobbies of my youth, I guess. I have a wood shop in my apartment
Nice.
that we just moved to this apartment, so it's really nice to be able to practice a craft that exercises and uses some of the same skills that I have on set. But without relying on everybody else or relying on a job to exist in order to do it. I do some pretty advanced like joinery and furniture making and things like that. And people have been like, oh, you should sell that. And I'm like, I really do not want to sell it, because if I do that, then it changes the whole game for me, and it takes it from a hobby to a job, and it takes a lot of the fun out of it. And, I'd rather Drew, if you want a piece of furniture, let me know. I'll make it for you. You just pay for the wood, and I'll happily make a piece of furniture for you.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I find it very helpful and meditative to do something with my hands. Being out from behind a screen, because so much of our professional lives are just spent staring at screens. It's just so great to be out from behind a screen, really lose yourself in some sort of process. Honestly, man, if I go out in the back right now and I start pulling weeds and doing some yard work, kind of does the same thing. You need that break. So I'm happy to hear that your downtime consists of taking a not a step back, but a sidestep, and just leaving the work as work and going and doing something else. It's good for the mind. It's good for the soul,
Absolutely. And if I could, I would be working all the time. I just, without commercials, it's really I'm work for 3 months and then I don't have anything for 3 months. It's just kind of the nature of it. And waiting for the next feature. And there is that hustle. There's still hustle of okay, I have to read a script and read a bunch of scripts and, meet with directors and try to get a job and put together a lookbook. And it's a lot of work to and it's very draining to try to get a project that you really want and then not get it. And it's okay, well, that was just a lot of energy that
man. Spent. Eyes of My Mother, that feature, was that you were still not a union DP at that point, right?
Correct. Yeah. It just went from 0 to 60 really fast. And it was okay, we're going to Sundance. I've never been before. That's crazy. And what's that about? And then one of the producers was you're looking for an agent, right? And I'm yes, I am. I don't know what that is, but yes, of course I am. So I, had a couple of meetings at Sundance with representation and kind of didn't really work out then. So then 2016 was a real slow year coming off of something. I mean, comparatively, I had nothing going on in 2016. And then it seemed there was nothing happening. And then in the fall of 2016, another feature came through that was it's called Jonathan. And that was a union project and truly coincidental. And it was the line producer had seen Eyes of My Mother and was really stoked on it and wanted to bring me on. And I interviewed with the director, Bill Oliver, and we really got along and I love the script. And it was amazing. Okay, I'll do a union movie and I have to join the union, I guess. And I just learning about all these things. Something actually I want to emphasize here is that there's a weird lag between because Eyes of My Mother blew up so fast and so early for me. There was this perception from a lot of the people that I was working with in 2015, for example, and before that, the people who kept hiring me to shoot all those interviews, that I wasn't available or that I cost too much because I did a movie that was successful, right? Meanwhile, I'm trying to get all these jobs shooting more features, and they're oh, you did one movie? That was a, indie darling at Sundance. I don't care about that. So I just had no work because it was nobody wanted to hire me on either end. And I'm just what do I do? And that lasted a really long time. And I feel that perception even lasted through, 2020,
That whole idea of perception, right? Is that, from the outside looking in, you're on a rapid come up, right? There's a lot of assumption that, oh, you must be unavailable or cost too much money. And the reality is such that it's with that luck comes a little bit of struggle in the sense that you couldn't get any work, not because you weren't good enough, but just because that's the way the chips fell and the way the timing worked out. Your whole attitude seems so like positive. And I don't want to say that you just like go with the flow and don't have any intention, but you know, maybe it's just the world you've rolled in, like the little segment of filmmaking where it's you've been really focused in narrative and feature work and less so on commercials. I'm so impressed that you've kind of like chosen to be very positive and like very up, you know, about your career path and about navigating an industry that is really tricky, luck aside. Luck plays into everybody's existence in a creative profession, but it's, you know, there's still a lot of hard work. And I know you probably work your ass off like most of the time. And one thing that I kept seeing on your Instagram is, is the daily stretching. The stretching routine. Most people in our line of work do not take care of themselves at all. They run themselves into the ground because they feel like they have to. Keeping yourself sane and healthy falls way down on the priority list. Has it always been a priority for you? Or did you have an experience where it's like, oh, no. I need to like take a step back. I need to prioritize like wellness, being centered, and I'm going to share that with my crew. And I don't want to make any assumptions. I just love that you guys did a daily stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, there's so much you said that I'm like, yes, resonates with me, and I feel really good about. And yes to all of it. But I think the stretching in particular is not for me a wellness. It is a little bit a wellness thing. And I'm pretty bad at remembering to stretch in my daily life. I just kind of do it on set. And this came from a DP I was working with in film school. His name is Andrew Ellis. I was gaffing for him on a student film called Indelible, and we were in Puerto Rico, and he and I were sort of like, I don't know, he was showing me how to run the grip and electric department. It was cool because I was like, oh, okay, I have like a leadership role here that I didn't really recognize before that. And he really relied on me to like run the team. And we ran it very much like football plays. Like we had all of our diagrams of how we're going to do it and strategized around the timing of things and who was going to do what. And we, handpicked a really excellent group of people. And I forget where exactly the stretching first happened, but it was like, we should just do this every day. So I started to do it with just the grip and electric department on that student film. And it was at first like, we're going to go put our bodies through a lot of manual labor today. And we're going to be asked to do a lot and think a lot throughout the day. So let's give ourselves 10 minutes before everybody starts asking all the questions to focus just on ourselves and to get our bodies limber and ready to do the physical work, but also to like set aside this time for feeling like a group. And it felt like, oh, we're a sports team when we do stretches together. After that, every time I would shoot something, a narrative thing in particular, I would do stretches with the crew, and it sort of just became a tradition. The other benefit is I think it inspires people to be on time, and timeliness is so important because it's a two-way street about our expectations around time. Both the union and crews in general really emphasize like, we have lunch at exactly 6 hours, and we start overtime at exactly 12 hours. And we, every 15-minute interval is these meal penalties and whatever. So it's all like very carefully tracked. So I think in order to have that be a reasonable request or demand on production, it needs to be, the expectation is that we show up and start working immediately at call time. If we're going to expect that a meal is served at exactly 6 hours, and we just start working at exactly call time. So the stretches just sort of help, move things into motion.
I think it's really cool. It does a lot of things, and I know it seems like very small and very simple, but I think it does. It does all the things that you mentioned. But to like summarize it into a thought for myself and maybe to the audience, it's like, it just like mentally sets you up for the day. I think there's a lot of like beauty in that. And especially for someone like me, like I have I have a weird relationship with time. Time really stresses me out. I'm kind of like obsessed about how I don't have any. And it's all just about like managing your time internally, right? I just wanted to call out the onset stretching specifically because I've been kind of keeping track of it on your Instagram. I'm like, that's dope. Like nobody does that. Nobody prioritizes that for themselves, let alone like an entire crew of creators. So that's really cool.
I want to speak to you're talking about positivity as well, because it's not something you asked if it was something that I like made an intention about. It's not. It's just I love being on set. I love shooting movies. I have so much fun doing it, both in prep and production. And and I just want to give everybody that energy because they're going to give me that energy back. And if I keep treating it like a summer camp as opposed to a job, then it's going to feel good doing it.
I love the idea of treating it like a summer camp. And if people listening have not been on a film set, it's literally like an all hands on deck kind of experience. You feast or famine based on the people around you. So Absolutely. I love the idea of making it feel like summer camp. I really love the prioritizing, the positivity, the fun, the intention, like all that stuff.
Speaking to features specifically, it's an endurance game, right? And you have to keep everybody motivated the whole time to keep doing the best work possible. And even like, just aside from the stretches, I have all kinds of little routines and like games and tricks just to like keep it fun. I play music all the time on set between takes. I have it just like on a speaker on the dolly and just play music whenever I possibly can. I have like toothpicks to hand out that are delightful and just, I don't know, all kinds of little like fun things. So.
Well, I also love that you're like making it about everybody else that's there with you and not about yourself. This is a really good segue into how you manage things personally. Managing a personal life is hard. On top of trying to manage a career that requires a lot of your time and requires, in some cases, especially yours, a lot of time away from home. What have you developed for yourself to manage like a personal life and keeping that as a priority? Like, what does that look like? Like, what does managing a personal life look like in your particular world?
Yeah, I think it's about setting expectations for each other and trying to support each other in whatever ways possible. I think my partner Willa and I have very different outlooks and approaches to things, but they like are perfectly complementary. So she's more of an introvert, I'm more of an extrovert, and that means it's actually kind of great when I go out because then she gets alone time. And if it's too much of me around, I kind of annoy her. And it's like, but for me, it's freedom to like say, oh, I can go have a social life, but also I can go away on a job for a little bit. So that doesn't mean we don't miss each other. And it kind of goes through phases where it's, the initial, like we're missing each other. And then we both kind of get absorbed in our day to day, I'm working on a movie and she's a teacher, she's working at school. And then sort of near the end of a job, as it's getting close to the end of that, and I'm going to be coming home soon, we both start missing each other again. And it's like, oh, like I really just can't wait for this job to be done and to get home. And then, it's very exciting to be together again. And we have a great reunion. And then we kind of, I start looking for the next job and she needs more alone time. And it's like, okay, it kind of comes in waves. So I think because of that sort of different base outlook on things, it kind of works complementary in that way. From early on, when I first met her, I was like, this is just so you know, my job will mean I'm going to go away for a period of time. That's what I'm going to keep doing. And that's not going to change. So like, you have to be okay with that. And she is very okay with that and really understanding and allowing me the freedom to do that. Shortly after I met her, about a month after I met her, I started working on a feature called Callahan. That was shooting 2 blocks from her apartment. So for like 90% of it. So I would have long days, but I would just go to her place and I'd show up the next day and, walk down the street. It was great. Or bike rather, because I bike everywhere. I was like, just so you know, this is not normal. This is definitely not going to be the case. And it turned out to be true. That was the only time that proximity happened. And each job, it seems, has taken me further away in some ways and for potentially longer periods of time. So It's something that we're, still working on, like how to structure our lives around that. She also works at a summer camp over the summer. So she goes away for 2.5 months every year.
Oh, wow.
To work at summer camp. So I've been lucky enough to go visit and work at the camp as well and be a counselor, which is really fun.
Oh, that's cool.
And I like that she has the freedom to do that, and I can support her in doing that as well. And then we kind of structure our lives around that rhythm, right? Like, so leading up to the end of school, like she has to get ready to go to camp, and that's sort of a transitional time that I need to be careful around and make sure that like I'm supporting her in getting to camp successfully. And then when I have downtime over the summer, I try to go to camp and try to visit. And she's tried to visit me whenever possible. Bulgaria made that pretty hard, but she did come to Vancouver when I shot there last year, and it's just trying to visit each other when we can and make it work, I guess.
Yeah,
but
you said something about rhythm, which I resonate with. It's like establishing a rhythm, getting comfortable with the rhythm, and like communicating about like how that rhythm is going to change over time. The further down the road I get, man, it's all about just like communicating up front. I think rhythm is the best way to say it, like getting into that rhythm. Absolutely. And setting those expectations. That's really cool.
Part of that is also getting used to our very different lifestyles, not just that I'm away and back, but that my life's very unpredictable and her life is very predictable.
Our lives in the film industry don't make any sense from like a schedule or predictability standpoint. Finding that person that helps balance that out is so key. To kind of transition into Barbarian, this was just like a huge movie, a huge job for you. I started seeing the buzz about this movie before I even knew you shot it. And I was like, what? Like, the last time I saw Zach was at a studio in the World Trade Center, and now he's like in Europe shooting like this giant, huge horror movie. Like, It like literally blew my mind.
Awesome.
I'm very happy for you. It's super cool.
Which blew your mind more, discovering that I shot it or discovering the twist in the movie?
No. Discovering that you shot it. Full disclosure, I have not seen it yet.
Oh man, you were in
I'm going to watch it, but I also don't feel.
I didn't say what was going on.
No. But I also don't feel bad about saying I haven't watched it yet, because for anybody who's judging me right now, I have a baby. If you haven't had a baby, talk to me after. Anyway,
totally fair. No rush.
But
when you get
but after I found out that you had shot this movie, I started seeing like all the behind the scenes stuff that you had posted. And it's like, it is what I would call a real movie, in the sense of like what I perceive to be a real movie, where it's like, we're building sets in another country. You needed to build like a neighborhood, or you needed to shoot in a neighborhood. So it's like, no, we're just going to build the neighborhood. Like, huge, like scale wise, scope wise, huge. How did that even happen? Obviously you've been making features and you've been building connections and you have an agent and like they're putting you out for things. And I get that part, right? But how did you even become part of the conversation to shoot that movie?
So it's through a great relationship I have with the producers at Boulderlight Pictures. Rafi and JD are the two guys there, and they've been sort of my champions for a while now. I shot The Vigil for them in 2018, which was directed by Keith Thomas, another horror movie, and we loved working together. They loved the work that I put into it, and they've tried to get me on a number of movies since then. The timing didn't work out a couple of times, but I did really enjoy working with them. So they really wanted me to shoot Barbarian, and they were like, we got this awesome script, we really want you to do it, and just put me up for it. And I almost feel, I don't know exactly what happened in the decision-making process, but I almost feel like, they sold me pretty hard to Zach Kroger before we met, and I think they really wanted me to do it. So I think it was like, oh, this is going to happen anyway. I'm sure Zach decided, and I don't know who else he met with about it. But when I did meet Zach, we also really hit it off. So it was a good a good combo. So yeah, that was the main reason, is because of them, and championing me through things. So and they've continued to be huge fans of mine. So
did it, from a creative aspect, right? And again, just basing it off of, what I was able to see and read that you were posting. I mean, I would qualify that job as the thing to reach for in terms of being able to think about how you want to do something or how you want something to look and like make it happen. The thing I'm thinking about, and you'll have to like tell me specifically because my memory on it's not that great. There was something to do with a water tower, like some shot on a water tower that seemed rather involved. I'm used to like shoehorning a shot into like an environment, like work with what you got, right? And I know you've worked with what you've got and lots of jobs, I'm sure. But like this seemed different to me as creative professionals and people listening wanting to level up. And I made a little note for myself that said leveling up, right? What was that creative freedom like? Like what did that look like? And then we'll circle back at the end because I want to talk a little bit about leveling up and if you have any advice for people listening.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, I think I've always it just felt the same really as before in many ways, because for me, I just don't take no for an answer. I always try to problem solve something. If the director wants something to happen, I'm like, let's make that happen, and, maybe there's a compromise. Maybe we have to, we truly can't make whatever happen. But usually it's a budget question. And if it's a budget question and the director really wants it to happen, we can find something in the budget to make it work. And we all know, whatever project I'm on, we know the scope of it. We know what's realistic. So we're usually not asking for something that's like totally out of the realm of possibility. But it's if that's the thing we want, and if this is the kind of movie we're making, let's make that then. And if you don't compromise on the vision, you can compromise on the technical stuff and like, the way it's executed is maybe not the perfect way, or if we did have 10 times more money, we would have done it a different way. But the vision is we're true to the vision and always saying like, well, there's still creative freedom here. We still are just going to do exactly the thing we want to do. And the result will be hopefully as close to what we've pictured as possible. So I've always kind of had that philosophy. So going into Barbarian was no different in that sense. But there were still the usual constraints on things. And yes, we were building sets, and I had never worked in a studio really before and done like a full set build, and I've done like little things and here and there, but having to like light day interior without daylight, like I don't know, that was truly the challenge and the scary part for me, but it was exciting. And so much of the design of the interior of that house came down to Zach and I talking about the blocking and the shots that we wanted to do, and tweaking with the wall positions and which room goes where and how high is that countertop and all that. And then, there were so many, struggling to not give any spoilers, but there are so many details about the set that Zach had envisioned really clearly. So he had the ideas for that. And my job was just to push for that and really fight for it and make sure that we were delivering on exactly what he wanted with it. And then we would get pushback from production, as you always do. And they're like, oh, well, that's not safe, or we don't have enough space for that, or whatever. We're like, okay, well, if we, instead of saying, okay, well, we don't have enough space for that, it's too expensive, we would say, okay, well, what if we position this a little differently on the set? And what if we arrange it this way? And what if we make a compromise here? And, that's not safe. Well, let's make it safe so that we can do the thing that's the vision. What would it cost? And, that's going to cost that amount. Well, maybe we can save money doing something else. So just figuring out what the priorities are and getting the vision clear and pushing for that the whole time. It was the same kind of conversations. With the water tower in particular, or the silo as we called it, there was a studio that had a back lot that was supposed to be like an American suburban neighborhood. They called it Americatown. And
perfect.
Yeah. And we had seen videos of it, and it was like, okay, maybe that would work. Yeah, if we like shoot it from this angle, blah, blah, blah. And that started to feel like the thing, and it was kind of what they were pitching. And then the line producer over there, sort of the local fixer guy who was awesome, his name is Yvonne, and Elisa, the two of them are sort of co-line producers. The two of them were like, well, we should probably just build it because this isn't going to work. And Zach and I were both looking at the videos. We're like, we think we could do it, but it also feels pretty restrictive. And so much of the film takes place in this like environment where the houses relating to each other really matters. And it felt like might be too tight. So like, we'll just build it. And I think building stuff in Bulgaria is relatively inexpensive. That was a huge draw to go there, and also a draw to go back now for the project I'm on now. So building something from scratch was not infeasible, and the key was just finding the road that it could be on in an empty space without too many background elements that were a problem. So they found an agricultural laboratory, which is basically a farm, but it's like they were doing research on tomatoes.
Okay.
And tomatoes are a huge crop in Bulgaria. The tomatoes there are delicious. So we go to this tomato research lab, and they've got this like open field area and a sort of old concrete road that like stretched down the middle of a thing. We're like, that could make sense. So we started mapping it out with the production designer and figuring out what it could be. That was all before we had gone. And I was really nervous about that because I was like, I don't know if it's going to work. And like work with what you've got. It just made a lot more sense to me. Like I can adapt to the environment more than I can just like do it from scratch. But so we get there. Very first day in Bulgaria. Sorry, the story is dragging out of it. Good. We get there, and they had already started laying the foundations for some of the facades, and we were like, "Oh man, this is really. I hope this is going to work." And we started shifting things around. And we're like, "Where exactly is the church going to go at the end of the block?" And we look in one direction, could be there, could be over here, and we look down over in the other direction. We're like, "Well, it could go right where that silo is, but then we have to like cover the silo, and that's a whole thing." And I'm just like, off the top of my head, I'm like, "What if we just make it take place in a silo instead of a church?" And everybody paused for a second, and I was like, "Uh-oh, did I say the wrong thing? Am I going to get fired right now? Is this the end of this relationship? Whatever." And Zach pauses and he goes, "Okay, yeah, we can make that work." Like, all right. So that was just kind of, again, making use of what was there, because it was actually going to be a lot cheaper. And let's invest our building money into more facades that complete the neighborhood instead of into a church. So that was a compromise that served kind of both purposes.
My assumption is that when you're operating at like this level, that things are way different. And they're really not. And I mean that in a positive way. In the sense that it's like, it seems like you're just doing the job you know how to do, that you're used to doing, and problem solving, and like trying to do more for less money and like all this stuff. And I view that as a positive, right? Even though you're operating up here and there's more money and there's seemingly more of everything, you're still just like, how can we work with what we got, come up with a simple solution, just be as scrappy as possible. So that's really, really cool.
And that's the New Yorker in both of us.
Totally.
Because I think New York is all about scrappiness.
New York is all about scrappiness and getting away with whatever you can
exactly
to get the shot, which is so clutch. Given the fact that you have such like a real and honest take on what this all looks like, that you're just kind of doing the job you're used to doing, just on a slightly different scale. It's like, do you have any advice for people who are just trying to, level up their career? Hell, man, I could use some advice. Like, I want to, start climbing up a little bit more. Like, what would you tell me if I'm like, I'm sitting here saying, Zach, I really want to get into like shooting narrative work, which I do, I think that would be great. I would aspire to be like working on something, operating at that level. What would you tell me? And by association, the people listening.
Sure. I think there's two things. One is to drop the aspiring and, just like put it out there that you're already doing it, like you're shooting narrative work. Great. Like, keep doing that, and like, let everybody know that you do that. And I think the more that you set this reputation for yourself that like, this is a thing I do, then it'll just keep happening, and it'll start happening in ways that it didn't before. So yeah, I think that's the first thing. And it's just kind of like a reputation building thing of just putting your identity out there in a certain way, right? And for me, like, I look back to in film school when I was like, I'm a DP now. Everybody's like, oh, you must be a good DP. Like, sure. And I look to the moments when I stopped ACing and I'm like, I'm full-time a DP now. Like, okay, sure. And then it just happens, right? And so I think just kind of assuming that it's happening and putting it out there is like the first thing, right? The second thing is a piece of advice my dad always gave me about just making decisions about how to move forward, I guess, and committing to something. He described it as like whenever there's a bunch of options in front of you, it can feel really hard to step through the door of a certain option because it feels like you're closing the doors next to you, right? But the reality is that when you walk through that door, you're accessing the next set of doors in front of you. So to kind of leave behind some of the maybe safety nets or alternate options in favor of taking the leap forward so that more opportunities in that next realm present themselves is a better way and has worked out for me in many realms, not just in my career, but also in my personal life. And getting engaged, I was, like, do I, don't I, what's like the marriage, what is that, and all that. And it was like, I conjured this idea that my dad had talked about, and I was like, oh, like I'm just taking the leap and taking the next step and diving in deeper so that there's even more opportunities ahead of me. And that's so exciting. So I think committing full stop to something and giving up any kind of like safety nets, and similarly with like when I was like, oh, I'm not going to AC anymore, that's a safety net because it was like, this is work that's predictable, right? Yep. So giving that up was the best decision I made, right? So I think that's like the advice, I guess, is just keep commit to moving forward and give up those safety nets.
Dude, that's great. Like, drop the aspiring and just like will it basically into existence. And and I mean that's great. That's great. I love the whole visual metaphor of like walking through a door and then you have the next set of doors. Exactly. And yeah, sometimes it is all about just like taking a leap. And if the more okay you get with that idea, the better things work out after the fact has been my experience. So
absolutely. Same.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, what's next for you in this post-Barbarian film world? Like I don't know if you can talk about your next project or like what does life and career look like for you now?
Yeah. So last year was before Barbarian came out. So it was a funny, like, still there's such a lag with features too. Like you shoot something and then it takes, a year plus for anybody to discover that it happened. So shooting multiple features takes many years, and it's like, it takes forever to be from somebody to be like, oh, you have a body of work. It's like, yes, I've been telling you this the whole time.
I wasn't making it up.
Yeah, I promise. I'm okay with this. So, but anyway, so last year, after we shot Barbarian, but before it had come out, I shot a documentary series called The Monster Factory. It was my first time shooting documentary to that extent. I had done a lot of day playing on things, helping Greg out, and working here and there on other things. And I learned a lot from Greg actually in prep for Monster Factory. And he gave me some really good advice about camera operating and just approach things. And I love Greg.
He's always, he doesn't say much, but when he says something, it's always very pertinent and poignant.
Absolutely. And I was lucky enough also to bring him on to operate for a couple of days at the end of that project. But anyway, the Monster Factory is about it's about a pro wrestling school in South Jersey called the Monster Factory, and it just got released on Apple TV Plus 3 weeks ago. So you can check that out. And I'm really excited about it. I think it's an awesome project and a really cool story. And it's like it follows the coach and head of the Monster Factory school and 4 or 5 wrestlers who are like the main characters and some other wrestlers that are in their circle who are trying to make it to the big leagues, basically. I love the story that we ended up telling, and it was a really cool world to dive into. So that was most of my time last year. And I should mention, shout out to my friend Rob Coe, who was the first AC on that, and Logan G, who was sort of Rob's replacement for many days. The two of them are really good buddies of mine, and Rob was the first on the Terrible, Awful, No Good, Very Bad Chinese Road Trip movie on BCAM. So I met him from that, and we've stayed really good friends. And he worked for 6 months with me on Monster Factory. And Logan, I met doing The Climb, and he's an amazing focus puller, an awesome guy. And he came on as well for a few weeks here or there. But such a great team, and I met a lot of Philly crew doing that. So sorry, I digressed a lot.
All good.
But Monster came out a couple weeks ago. Check it out. And then at the end of last year, I shot a movie called The Dating Game, which is Anna Kendrick's directorial debut. And she also starred in it, and she was fantastic to work with. Really just an awesome film I'm very excited about. And I don't know if I can talk too much about it, but it's a true crime thriller and based on a real story of a serial killer who made an appearance on the Dating Game TV show in the 60s. That, I don't know when that's coming out. Hopefully end of this year, maybe early next year. We'll see. But I've heard good things about the edit so far, and I'm very excited about that movie. And that was another example of like a level up, and another example of Boulder Light really bringing me along. And they brought me onto that project and pitched hard for me to do it, and I'm so grateful to them to get me on that. So really cool experience with some amazing people, and I can't wait for that movie to come out. Hopefully it will read not as a horror movie. I don't think it's a horror movie, and I'm excited about that.
Very cool, man.
As well.
And when do you head to Bulgaria again?
Going back maybe in a month or less, maybe 3 weeks from now, going back there and continuing to prep the movie I'm on right now. So yeah,
dude, look at you go, man. You've got a full plate, but you know what? You like your attitude's so good, and you're such a friendly guy, and it's like it doesn't surprise me that you're getting the success and the repeat business that you're getting, that people are like putting you up for other work to people they run across. So that's so cool, man. So before I let you go, where can people find out more about you?
My website, ZachKuperstein.com, and my Instagram, my handle is Zach Kuperstein.
Easy. Yep. Easy guy to find. Anyway, Zach, I'm super psyched for you. I really appreciate you doing this. And we'll stay in touch.
Awesome. Thanks,
Cool,
Drew.
man.
Take care.
There you have it, folks. That was my interview with cinematographer and all-around nice guy, Zach Kuperstein. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to his website and his Instagram profile to see what he's up to. If you want to find out more about this show, you can find us online at nosetpath.com or on Instagram at nosetpathpodcast. And if you want to learn more about me, your host, Drew English, you can go to drewenglish.com, or my Instagram profile is Drew English with 2 H's at the end. You can also link to my Twitter and LinkedIn profiles from the website as well. Thanks again for being here. Here's to another run of 10 consecutive episodes of No Set Path, and we'll see you next week.